pound now. Should I be doing that, or?
I think you're fine. As long as you
Okay.
can hear me and I can hear you.
Okay.
I think
Perfect.
we're good.
Okay.
All right. Yeah. All right. Welcome, everybody. My name is Karen Howe, and I'm the Training Director at Contract Logix. This is an introduction to the system for your company, and the session is being recorded, so Brad's going to have a recording of that available after the class today. Contract Logix is we're a fairly small software vendor. We're located in Chelmsford, Massachusetts. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the area. I know you're up in Portland. So, but you know, I typically teach people from across the country and sometimes internationally, so I have to kind of pinpoint where Massachusetts is and explain that it's a little bit north of Boston. But I don't think I have to do that for you folks.
We can only hope.
Yeah. I'm hoping to get up to Portland sometime like this late spring or early summer. I don't get up there often enough, so I want to go up for a weekend maybe. Anyhow, this is our agenda for today, and I didn't really prepare a handout or anything for you. There is documentation on the system, the generic system, which Brad probably has and could make available to you if you really wanted it. But I think that what I'm going to cover today, if you just take some notes and you know, pay attention and ask questions, you'll do fine. I'm going to start off with a sort of a tour of the user interface, so I call that getting started. And then I'm going to show you how to add new contracts in. We'll go step by step in adding records in and also documents. And then we'll talk a little bit about ways to search for contracts. And that's probably about as far as we'll get to today. And then in Friday's session, the follow-on to this, we'll talk about how to link contracts, different ways to send email, and setting up alarms or notices, email notifications for your key date fields in the second half. And we're just going to see how far we get today. I'm hoping to get through all of Section 3. But as I'm going through and showing you things, I'm going to be working in your live system. So you're going to see contracts probably that you're familiar with or recognize. So I have Brad with me today to answer questions or to help me if I get lost because I'm in your environment. But I'm going to be driving the sessions, and he'll be there to answer, you know, your questions as well. I'm hoping that you are going to ask a lot of questions as I go through. And feel free just to shout them out, or else if you don't have I don't know if all of you have a microphone or phone. If you can't, you can always use the chat window in the GoToMeeting control panel, which, as I explained, it's a little panel that slides in and out from the right-hand side of your screen. If you find yourself in a situation where there's a lot of noise in the background, you want to mute yourself, you can do that also through that control panel. There's a little picture of a microphone. Click that, and that will mute you. If I do find that it gets too noisy, I might have to mute all of you. I don't expect that to happen, but sometimes we get some background noise going on. So that's the plan for today. We have about an hour and a half together today, and then we'll finish up on Friday. Before I get into the system, sure.
Quickly, I'm sorry, that mute button, is that little green one?
The one that, yeah, the green one that looks like a little microphone.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You can also push the mute button on your phone if you want to. That works too.
Right.
Right, or eat my apple.
Yeah, we're all going to hear that crunch, crunch, crunch. So, yeah, before I get into the system, I want to talk a little bit about what a contract record is, because so much of everything that we're going to talk about today is related to what a contract record really is. And this is a relational database where you're going to store data and the documents themselves. So when I think about the contract record, I actually think about three different aspects of it. Data fields, and that would include classification information. For example, what kind of contract is it? So category. What is its status? Is it active? Is it expired? Certainly key dates related to that contract, like expiration date, effective date, and any other dates that you need to track. And then we have a bunch of fields which I kind of lump as customer-defined data fields. So some of the fields we supply in our standard screens, and some of them have been are specific to your organization. So let me back up a little bit. When Memic first acquired this software, there was some initial training with a few key users, and then you worked with one of our implementation specialists to configure the system. So adding custom data fields, talking about how to set things up and so forth. That happened a while ago, and sometimes when you first do it, you need to come back and revisit it. So actually, you're in the process right now of working with another implementation person from here at Contract Logix to kind of take a second look and make sure that everything is set up in the most optimal way. And Brad is meeting with, I believe it's Alex, that's the person who's working with you, to kind of do that. So as we go through the system and look at various things, keep in mind that in the process of optimizing how it's working, things might change just a little bit. Not drastically, but little things here and there might get cleaned up or changed or made more usable or workable for you. Another key component of the contract record are the documents themselves. So you're able to upload copies of any type of document associated with the contract record, like the actual contract itself in PDF format or Word format, any exhibits or any other kind of document you want, Excel, TIFF, all kinds of formats are supported. And they're automatically stored with the contract record so that they're easy to get to. And then I break out contacts a little bit separately, mostly because of the way you enter contacts into the system. You enter them in a separate window and then select them for a contract record. And contacts include the external companies, your vendors, contact persons at those vendors, and internal contacts at your own company. And one of the reasons why we do that separately is so that you can, set up one company record and then use it over and over again, not have to enter it for fresh every time you go and put a new contract record in. So if there's some distinct advantages to setting those up separately and then just linking them into the record. So when I log into the system in a moment, you're going to see, we're going to take a look at an example contract record, and you're going to see some of, where do you find all this information? Okay, so again, these are some of the topics we're going to be exploring first. I'm actually going to have Brad log into the system because I don't have a login in your database, and then I'm going to talk about the different menus and toolbars that you're likely to see. We'll take a tour of the contract folder, which is the primary workspace when you're in the system. We'll look at those main tabs, the contacts, a brief look at some of the other windows, and I've got a couple of tips and tricks for working in Contract Logix. So at this point, I'm going to log in, except that I'm going to pass control to Brad so that he can log in here. So let me give you keyboard and mouse. Okay. Let me go ahead and put in your username and password, Brad. This is the screen that you'll see when you, can you see it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Just kind of, yeah, go ahead. Can you see your username section right there?
Yes, I just can't click into it.
What's that?
I just can't click into it, though.
You can't click into it? Oh, hold on a second. Maybe it's there. Try it again. Probably because it was in the background. Can you do it now? It can't click in? Huh. Weird.
Okay. I can't.
You're not on a Mac, are you?
You have to give keyboard and mouse control
Yeah,
over,
I've given
and
him.
I think Brad, are you logged in as help desk?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. He's got controls. I can
Okay, so
take it away.
you'll have to stop moving the mouse so that he can take controls. Otherwise, it doesn't work.
Right, but he's moving the mouse. I'm not moving the mouse.
Oh, you were moving the mouse, Brad?
Yeah, he's moving it, but here's something. Let me make this let me do that. No? Okay, hold on. Let me try something else. Let me try starting this again. You want to try again, Brad? No? Isn't that weird? Okay. Well, plan B. I'll take over. All contract logic systems have a master user ID, which allows me to log in. I'm not going to stay as master because a lot of the things that we want to show won't be available, but just FYI, if we, in other words, Contract Logix ever needs to get into the system, it's a way for us to get in to help you. What I'm going to do right now is I'm using, this is not something that any of you need to know, but Brad, I'm going to reset your password so that I can log in as you, and then I'll come back in as you. This, by the way, this little change your password pop-up is something that all of you will see the very first time you log in. Your password will always be 123 to begin with, and then you're going to change it. Brad, I just kept it 123. After class, you can go ahead and change it back if you want. This will at least allow me to get in. And this is pretty much what all of you will see when you log into the system for the first time. A Getting Started menu that pops up, and oh, we're actually sending some email notifications. I guess you haven't. No one's logged in today yet. Down in the bottom left-hand corner, you're seeing some red messages. I was planning on talking about that on Friday, but here you see it in action. What's happening is at the first login of the day, email messages, and hopefully there won't be too many of them. Oh, good. Go out. None of those actually went out. We had some failures. Let's talk about that on Friday. But anyway, that's something that. Oh, it's probably because I'm running it from my side. That's something that happens automatically. The email alerts go out, and then when it's done, you get the little report, and then you can just dismiss that window and continue on your way. So this is the Getting Started menu. You don't have to use this, but it's kind of a nice window to start out with because there are an awful lot of toolbars and menus and things, so it can get a little bit confusing. So this Getting Started menu has just a few buttons on it that represent the key things you're likely to need to do. For example, to go look for or add contacts, to add a new contract into the system, go searching, and so forth. The ones in the bottom are, they may not be available to you. They are typically, except for this one right here, system administrator functions. But again, it all depends on how your system is set up. Now, before I close this off, I want to show you another button here, this View Tutorials button. When you click that, will take you to a contractlogix.com web page where I have some short tutorials. They run about 10 minutes or so, and you can watch those if you want to learn a little bit more or you need a refresher on the material that I'm going to cover today. Okay, I'll go ahead and close that down, and now we'll take a look at okay. My system is not happy with your system. Let's try this again. Let's try it. Now this time we won't expect to see the email going out. It is checking his email and finds that it's not configured correctly, and that's because I'm running it from my machine and not his. I won't bother with that. Okay, so coming back here, this is after you close the Getting Started window, this is what you're going to see. Over on the left, there's something called the Easy menu, and across the top, all these icons are your that's your main toolbar. And in fact, a lot of these, if you start from right around here where it says New CTX, that stands for contract, and go across like this, it's the same items going down the list. So basically, this is a duplication of some of the functions that are up here. It's just an alternate way, and that sometimes people find the icons with the little text a little bit hard to read, and they can't really be expanded that much. These might be easier for you to see. So it's really a personal preference. If you decide you don't really need the Easy menu, you can click that button, and it just kind of hides it over there. So the toolbar is your main way of interacting with the system, and right above it there is the main menu. Now under there you've got a help menu. That's another way to get to the tutorials. You know, a pretty standard Windows menu. A system menu that primarily has system functions in it, so we're probably not going to go over most of those. There are a couple of things we'll talk about on Friday in here. A contracts menu and a file menu. Okay. So there's many different ways to do a lot of the things that I'm going to show you. There are even right-click menus in the system. So for example, if I'm down here and I right-click, I get a whole pop-up menu of things that are appropriate to do on the contracts themselves. What we're looking at right in front of us is the contract folder. You'll see that it's divided into various tabs: Search, Details, Document Manager, Action Items, Email Manager. Okay, so we'll be spending today looking at the first three tabs, mostly the first two. But down below, we have the contract browse list, and you've got 313 contracts in this database right now, the number in parentheses. At least those are all the contracts that I can see. When you log into the system, one of the things that you might not see is the contracts themselves. The reason why we saw them is because Brad had his auto refresh turned on, which is fine, but ordinarily, let me close that, when the contract folder opens up, it'll look like this. So don't be alarmed if you have no contracts. It just means that the system didn't automatically retrieve all the rows in the database. Okay, you can set that to auto refresh if you want by clicking the auto refresh icon, and then just hit it once, hit refresh once to refresh. Or you can leave it without any contracts in here and use the search fields whenever you need to go looking for something. Okay. Now with 313 contracts, it's not a big deal either way. Some of our clients have thousands, like 30,000 records, and so it takes a little while to build the browse list, and that's why we don't auto-refresh by default. Okay, well once you've selected a contract, and I'm going to select this contract right here, and you'll see that there's some fields of information related to each contract record. And each contract record has a unique ID number. This one's contract number 75. And those numbers get assigned at the time the contract first went into the database. This is the owner of the contract. This is the status of the contract, active. It's with Cisco Systems. It's a master agreement. The category for this is IT hardware. This column, by the way, ignore. It says parent organization. That's eventually going to go away because you're not using that. Effective date and expiration date. But this information comes from fields on the Details tab. So once you've located a contract, you can double-click to look at its details, which is what I'm going to do right now. Okay, so on the Details tab, you'll notice that it's broken up into several distinct windows. On the left-hand side, labeled Contract Detail, are the main details for that contract. For example, the status, the contract number, the category, and who the contract is with, Cisco Systems, as well as some other fields here. Contract description. Over here, we have the key contract dates, effective expiration, the agreement date, and the purchase date. Here, a small window called Contracted Company Contacts. And although we don't know the name of the contact, it is a required field, so if you don't know it, you can put in unknown or not applicable. And here, our company contact. So Shalene, is it Shalene? Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yes, that's right.
She's here in the class today. So she's probably the person in the class who's been using it the most, who knows the most about it, I think. Because I noticed that you own most of these records. And so feel free to, chime in whenever if I'm explaining something a little bit different from the way you use it, or you just want to make a comment. Let us know.
I was just going to mention that some of these are just specific to IT, like maintenance costs and stuff like that. Not everybody's going to see all the same fields.
Right.
So you're probably going to mention that.
I am actually going to talk about the impact of category on what you see, but I'm glad you brought that up now, because as people are looking at this, they might be scratching their heads. Yeah. So this is all keyed off the category, and we're going to be creating some contracts. But what category you choose can drive what fields are available to fill in. And that's actually called a data view. So for each contract category, you could have a separate data view with different data fields. I mean, some of them are going to stay the same. Some are standard across the board, like the status and the category and the company name, but others, like she mentioned, cost center maintenance costs might only apply to certain contract categories. This Details tab also has a sub-tab called Notes, and here's one that has a note in it. So these notes are just free-form notes that you can add. And I don't think we're using group access, so we're not going to go there. Some of these tabs may be here, but they may not be actually used. So those are the details for that contract. But if I'm interested in looking at the documents themselves, then I would need to go to this tab, Document Manager. And here I can see that there are 2 PDF files associated with this. Okay, and I can read those PDFs. I can preview them simply by double-clicking on them. So I'll just pick one of these at random. Okay, so here's a document. It almost looks like an email or something, and I could read this one as well. And because they're PDFs, they come up in a, let's close that down, they come up in a separate, like Adobe window, Adobe Reader in my case, it might be Acrobat in your case. And as I mentioned before, you could also upload Word documents or other types of documents, and Word documents will open right inside Contract Logix, and we'll be looking at that. Actually, we're not going to spend too much time on Word docs, I don't think. I think I'm going to add a PDF, but they would open up inside the system. Another tab labeled Action Items is primarily used to hold records related to alarms. And so here we have an expiration date alarm. And we will be looking at how to set alarms and how to interpret the information in this screen on Friday. Okay. And then there's also an email manager. I don't know if we have any emails related to this, but there's an email manager tab over here. So if you send any emails, you can see them there. Okay. Everything relates back to the selected contract. So once you select something from here, then every other tab shows you information or different aspects of the selected record. And we call this the browse list because it allows you, because of the fields that are displayed here, it allows you to basically browse through and find something that you're looking for. And I mean, there are some things you can do. For example, you can sort these lists by header. So if I want to sort by company, click on the company. Got a lot of Cisco Systems contracts. You can sort on any field you like, including the date fields. And I think the default sort is usually, for most systems, it's on the contract number, contract ID number. Okay, well that's the all-important contracts folder, and that's really your home screen. That's where you're going to be coming back to the search tab over and over again when you need to select another contract, or even when you're going to start a brand new one. But there are a couple of other places I just want to briefly show you. For example, there's a dashboard. I don't know whether we've customized it very much. Yeah, it's customized a little bit. Got your logo on here. This can be customized yourself. This is a personal settings, how you want to set this up, right? Various windows on here. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on this, but just understand that there's some things that you can do here to make working in the system a little easier. Contract, of course, takes me right back to the contract folder. I'm going to skip some of these, but contacts is where I'm going to find my lists of companies and contact persons. Okay, so this window always just kind of floats on top of the contract folder and allows me to go searching for companies. For example, I can search for companies in the contracted company category, do a search, and I get a list of companies. And I can select a company, and down here I can see who my my contact is. It looks like you're, in the most case, you're not really putting in contact info. Well, there's one. Okay. Behind this screen is a contacts details screen. And it's actually worth getting to know this screen a bit, because if you're going to be setting up new records, you're going to need to use this screen if you have to set up a new company. Okay. And so it's helpful to know how this is organized. The details for your contacts, the company information is on the left, so you have a place for the company name and address, although the address is not required. And on the right-hand side of the screen, contact person information. So first name, last name, their department title, their email or phone number, all over on this side. Okay. And we'll come back there when I set up a company. There is a screen called To-Do List, which allows you to track things like expiring contracts or other types of date alarms. That's typically what it's used for. There's even a action items calendar, which we might briefly talk about on Friday, that shows you pretty much the same information as the to-do list for expiring contracts, but it shows it in a calendar format. Okay. And then, of course, we've already looked at the Get Started menu. If you just find yourself totally lost, just click the green flag, and this will come up, and hopefully one of these main things will pop out at you. The last icon in all the toolbars is a close icon, and it's used to close the current window. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close down the to-do list because I won't be using it today. It's a nice, convenient way of closing the current window if you have to do that, rather than find the X for closing the browser. Of course, when I'm in Contract Logix, I don't want to close the browser tab because that would kick me out of the system. Another tip is do not use the back button, because again, you're at a website here. If you go back, you'll get kicked out. You'll get logged out. But when you are ready to log out for the day or leave it, for the time being, you can X out or X out, and that'll log you out. Okay. Does anyone have any questions about just sort of general navigation around in the system?
Not right now.
Okay. So let's do this. Let's go step by step through adding a contract in, and I'm going to do it once. Sometimes what I do with a group like this is I ask someone to also do it after I do it. It's a really good way to review, so we'll see how things go. But first, let me talk my way through how to add a new record into the database. First, we're going to start out by adding the contract record itself. So I'm going to select New CTX. It's one of the icons in the toolbar. I've got a few required fields, and I think there might be even one additional required field for you at MEMIC, and then you can save the record. Once you hit Save, assuming that you've entered information in all the mandatory fields, Contract Logix assigns the unique contract ID number. All right, so I'm going to click New Contract. Okay, and the system gives me a Details tab that is essentially blank. The only thing that's filled in really is the status, and that will always be selected and it will always be active. Now, if later on I need to change the status, I can do that, but not until I've selected my category. Okay. So this category list potentially is one of the areas that it's actually being looked at now in terms of maybe altering this a little bit. But right now you've got a lot of different categories, and not really being that familiar with your system, I'm not sure exactly how many different views you have, in other words, how many different screen designs per category, but they look like they're broken down into various departments or groups, right? You've got a bunch of claims categories and finance and IT categories. So I know you probably all come from various areas of the company, but what did we decide to do? We decided to do a software agreement. Was that right, Brad? I thought either service or software.
I think the same view. It's the same view for all the IT.
What was that again?
I think it's the same view. Whatever IT, when you click on most of them, and
yeah.
software is the same view.
Right. So I'm gonna do this one right here. But what I thought I would do is pick something that with a very different view, just for the heck of it. So let's try. I'm not sure what we're going to get. Okay. So you see how the screen is kind of changing a little bit, and now this view may not be fully baked. I can see some custom fields here, but this is a claims business agreement. The idea is not so much what does it look like in the end, but the fact that whatever category you choose can cause the screen to look a little different. So here's an admin contract. So it's really critical that you always pick your category first, because it will reset the screen. Okay. The next is the company name, and that's another required field along with category. This is your contracted company or your vendor, and again, you can select from a drop-down. Now here's a bunch. Here are all those current vendors. So if you want to look for your vendor in here, or whoever your other party is, and if you see it, you're going to select it just like that. But if you don't see it, then you're going to need to add it. And all you need to do is select Add Company here at the top of the list. Okay, now this brings up the screen I had open a few moments ago, the contract contact screen, and it's actually on the details. Okay, coming from a brand new record with an Add Company, it knows that I'm trying to add a contracted company, so you do not change this field. Okay, but it doesn't know the company name. So here's where I'm going to put in my company name. So for this example, I'm going to be Howe Industries Incorporated. Okay, so brand new company. You are not required to fill in the address, at least not for Contract Logix's part. If it's something that you folks want to enforce filling in, then that's your own policy. But only the company name is required. But I am going to be required to have a contact at that company. And again, I don't have to use a real name, but I have to have something in there. So here's this part can be a little tricky. So it's good to listen up and ask questions if you're not sure. After you filled out the company name field, you're on the left-hand side of the screen, on the company side. It's imperative that you click over to the right-hand side of the screen to the contact side before we do the next step. Because what I'm going to do is add a contact. Now you can do it by clicking the Add button right up here, or you can use a right click and select Add, but just make sure you're over there. Because if you're over here and you add, the system thinks you want to add another company. And what it does is it blanks this out. Okay. So now I can add my contacts. And I happen to have a name, or else you can use unknown, unknown. And again, the only fields I have to fill out are these two. So if you take a look at these three fields that are required, what do you notice about them? The labels are underlined. That is the Contract Logix convention for required fields. So if you see an underlined field, like when we come back to the screen, contract description, that means that it's required. The rest of the information in here is optional. Department, title, contact type, those are just drop-downs. Phone number goes here. Email address goes here if you care to enter it. If you don't want to enter it or don't need to enter any of that information, then you're pretty much done on this screen. But the second thing I want you to remember is you don't close this window. You select. Okay? You can close it, and it will certainly do that. It will disappear off your screen, but your company name field will be empty, which is not the idea here is to get this into here. So you want to press the select button. That will close the screen. It will save my information, and it selects it for this new record. So it's a win-win. If you do close the screen, you have to go back and find it. And it may be up on the top here. Sometimes it's not. So then you have to go back into this button and go searching for it. And I'll tell you, it's a whole lot easier just to learn it the other way. Okay, contract type. I'm not sure what we got here. We've got another long list of things. And again, these lists may change upon evaluation of how you're actually using the system, but let's pick something fairly generic like master agreement. And this view includes an additional field called cost center. They may not all have that. You choose something from the drop-down. The file location field may or may not stick around, but if it does, what it was intended to be used for is the location of the hard copy. We had a quick conversation last week, and we're thinking maybe you probably don't need it. In fact, most of our customers have hidden that field. They just don't use it. The master contract ID field will stay empty for now. It's only used if you're linking contracts together. Contract description. This is where you type a short description. I'm just putting in for training purposes of this one. Okay, so that whole section is now taken care of, but we have some other things we have to address, and that would be dates, if you want to put in dates at this point, although none of them are required, as you can tell by the no underlines. But I think it's important to know how to deal with date fields because they're a little bit unusual. First of all, there is a date calendar, but you don't access it by clicking that button. If you do click that button, it is an alarms button, so it's a way for you to set alarms. We'll be talking about that on Friday. But what you do is click directly inside the fields to get the calendar. All right, so if let's say my start date was May 1st, click that. My expiration date, if there is one, doesn't have to be. I can use the calendar, or I can do this. Oh, this is what I like. If I have to go out a year or two, so let's say the term of the contract is 2 years, I can click directly on the year portion and then click that little teeny up arrow a couple times, and that's a quick way to set that. Okay. I can also simply ignore the calendar. I can go into a field and then click a second time to dismiss the calendar, and then just type whatever date I want. And that's fine too.